Hi, Anne. How are you?
I'm doing well. Great to have you here. We were waiting for Caroline to join you, or will you start before she comes in, or how would you like to go about doing it? The
Yeah, I think
facilitation of
Caroline was having a slight challenge with the background, and your team was trying to sort that out. So I think I can start, and if she's going to join, I'm sure she'll be assisted to join in.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah.
So thank you, Rose, for taking the time to come and share with us the work that you're doing at UNECA. So welcome, and we will listen in to the great insights and the work that you're doing on the policy front. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. And I really appreciate the work that you've been doing. It's really visible. The conference has been wonderful. Last year was a success. This year is also equally a huge success. So just to appreciate that you've kept it going. To introduce myself to the rest who are here, my name is Rose Ronoh. I'm a gender and trade expert with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, specifically the Africa Trade and Policy Center. The Africa Trade Policy Center is assisting African countries to implement the Africa Continental Free Trade Area by helping them to come up with their implementation strategies, providing technical assistance with the CFTA Secretariat to negotiate some aspects. And I think most importantly, the African women have been able to push specifically for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area to have a protocol specifically for women and youth. So that's something that really excites me. So I have a presentation. I don't know if it is okay. I can be able to share it. If I have the rights, I should be able to share it. So you let me know if you can be able to see my screen.
Yes, Rose, we can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. So basically the presentation is going to be centered around the work that we are doing. To just give you an understanding of what the CFTA is, but in specifically looking at how women will benefit from the CFTA. My colleague Caro is here. I see she has come in. So in terms of we're going to run this, we're going to do a presentation. Our presentation, we're going to be asking for recommendations on what you think the protocol, the protocol for women could include in terms of policy recommendations. Thank you so much, Caroline. So I know I do not want to take it for granted that everybody knows what the CFTA is. I think it's become a common term now. A lot of people understand it, but you'll be surprised also that not many people also understand what the CFTA is or have a low level of awareness about it. And basically, it's a free trade area that will bring together 54 African countries to create a single market for both goods, services, investment, and basically to promote movement of capital and persons within the continent. And this comes from research that has been done before that the trade happening between African countries is very low at around 16%. But when you look at countries, continents like Europe, you look at the US, you look at Asia, trade between those countries are much higher. So it was the wisdom of the African Union heads of states that this agreement was put in place to just foster increased trade between African countries, and basically to get us out of the aid bondage that we've been in as African countries for a long time. And I really like what the previous speaker said, that an ounce of aid is worth less than, something like that. I need to get that. And I think it's really good that this agreement now focuses on African countries being economically independent as opposed to focusing on aid. So it entered into force in 2019, May 2019, when 24 countries had ratified. But now we have over 40 countries who have ratified this agreement. And by ratification means that they can be able to trade once all the modalities have been agreed on. We only have one country that is not a signatory of this, and this is Eritrea. But I believe with time, they'll be able to join in and be part of this agreement. So why the CFTA, or why the Africa Continental Free Trade Area? Mostly is to remove tariffs and also to look at dealing with non-tariff barriers. And just for demystification, what tariffs are: when you're trading with another country, there are import duties, export duties that are charged. And what the CFTA aims to do is to bring down tariffs across 90% of all trade between African countries. Non-tariff barriers are some of restrictions that countries put, for example, quotas. They put requirements of certain certifications. So those non-tariff barriers also with the CFTA are going to come down. So what will this happen? What will this lead to? To lead to access to wider markets. And for example, if you're trading in East Africa, then you have access to trade with West Africa, with South Africa, with northern part of Africa, because now the tariffs have been lowered, and you have preferential treatment when you take your goods to those markets as a result of this agreement. Investments also, there's going to be a lot of investment because of the opening up. The protocol on investment now is being finalized by the African heads of states. So you can be able to not only look at investment within your regional economic community, but you can look at investing in other parts of Africa. Also, in terms of industrialization, when you look at most countries who have been classified as first world countries, they industrialized before they could be able to get to that level of first world countries. They invested in manufacturing, and they were able to drive industrialization that led to what they are now. In terms of also sectors, expanding sectors, the removal of tariffs will lead to expansion of sectors, and also fostering regional value chains. And by fostering regional value chains here, I mean that you don't have to manufacture everything, within Kenya. You can get a raw material from Nigeria, come to Kenya, put it together, and export it to another, African country. So fostering regional value chains whereby you have different actors making one particular product under the preferential treatment of the low tariffs, that are going to be there under the African Continental Free Trade Area. And this will solve a lot of the issues that we have in Africa, job creation, food security. Right now in Kenya, we are dealing with a famine. So with this agreement, fostering increased trade, then you have even better movement of food products from one country to another. And, you can be able to now mitigate, some of those, issues. Also, coherent trade policy. For a long time, African countries, we've not been speaking as one. Even when we are at the WTO, we all have different voices. So this particular agreement looks at African countries, speaking as one, one voice, made in Africa. When you have a product in the shelves out there, then you should have some preference whereby you say that if I buy this product, then I'm providing employment for an African. So that kind of coherent policy whereby we complement each other as opposed to, fighting against each other. And colonialism has really, really fostered this incoherence in terms of trade policy, because, our colonial partners really focused on getting raw commodities out of Africa, as opposed to, getting Africa to trade amongst each other. So in terms of the operational instruments, I won't go so much about this, but maybe to mention them, the rules of origin. This is basically what gives, a passport, a commodity from Africa, a passport to say that this is made in Africa. And if it's made in Africa, then it means that it gets preferential treatment in terms of reduced tariffs when it goes to, those African countries. Also, online tariff negotiation. Basically, with the COVID-19, there was less movement. So an online negotiation platform for tariffs was put in place, and that now is being used. Also, non-tariff barriers mechanism. There is a portal, I think the website is there, you can see on the screen, whereby private sector can be able to report any non-tariff barriers, or barriers that are not related to tariff that is hindering you from trading one way or another. Also, the Pan-African Payment Settlement System is one of the operational instruments, and this is really important because in Africa, we are trading with foreign currency. If you do any international trade transaction, then you definitely use the dollar. And when you use the dollar, it means we're losing a lot because we're not using our own African currencies. So Afreximbank has put in place the Pan-African Payment Settlement System that will enable settlement of payments in African currencies. Thereby, we're not losing a lot by using foreign currency. Then the Africa Trade Observatory, also this is one of the instruments that just ensures that there's an online platform to collect, to process, trade between African countries, trade that is happening. And from this information, we can be able to make interventions. You can even be able to see whether the CFTA is working or it's not working. And one of the biggest weaknesses we've had as African countries is that we do not, put data, at the center stage of policy making. So this is really important to be able to inform the direction of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So in terms of the scope of the CFTA, we have trading goods, we have trading services, and then we also have phase 2. So trading goods is what I've talked about: elimination of the tariffs, elimination of non-tariff barriers, negotiation of the rules of origin. Up to now, around 87%, 88% has been agreed in terms of the rules of origin. Also, cooperation of customs entities and trade facilitation. In terms of services, this agreement will be looking at transparency and convergences in service regulators, mutual recognition agreements, in terms of licenses, certification of service suppliers, and also progressive liberalization of sectors. There are 5 priority sectors now that have been agreed upon. We have transportation, we have communication, business services, we have tourism, and financial services. So those are priority sectors that, if you would like to invest in this sector, those are sectors that have been prioritized, whereby you can be able to trade or invest in any African country. Then we have the phase 2 issues, which are currently under negotiation, almost completion. We have intellectual property rights, which just ensures that your rights, if you've invented something, if you have, created something, are protected. Then we have investment, which just governs how we can be able to invest in each other's countries. Competition policy is also another protocol that is currently also finalization of negotiation, whereby to just ensure that there isn't any unfair competition amongst African countries, and specifically women are normally big sufferers of this, especially when it comes to intellectual property rights. I think some of you may be knowing about the story of the Kiondo, the African Kiondo, which the intellectual property rights are said, to not be domiciled in Kenya anymore. Then we also have e-commerce. We realize that we are in the 4th industrial revolution, and there's a protocol dedicated to e-commerce to just ensure that we are promoting more trade online. And last but not the least, but the most important, especially when it comes to our session today, is a protocol on women and youth. And this is basically in realization of the challenges that women and youth are faced when it comes to trade. We have lack of access to information, lack of access to finance. We have gender-based discrimination, harassment, especially when you look at informal cross-border traders women form around 70% of them. And basically the injustices that come as a result of African culture, which, does not put the man and the woman on the same pedestal. Then it was the wisdom of, African heads of states that we have a protocol specifically dedicated to women and youth. So in terms of the CFTA, where they're centered on, this is really important, a research that we did as UNECA, to just look at where the areas that would have the biggest percentage gains in intra-Africa trade. And you can see there we have agri-food, we have services, we have industry, energy, and mining. So those are the sectors that will have a huge percentage growth, and those are the sectors that will have a lot of opportunities if you're looking at now taking advantage of the CFTA. Specifically, when it comes to agribusiness, you have cereals, crops, milk, dairy products, sugar, processed food. When it comes to services, we have tourism and transport. When it comes to industry, we have wood, paper, chemicals, rubber, plastics, pharmaceutical products, amongst others. And when it comes to energy and mining, we have refined oil. So this is research that is available. I'm going to be sharing this presentation, then you can be able to have in-depth look at this so that you can be able to better prepare yourselves to leverage, especially if you belong to these sectors. And to the crux of our discussion today, which is inclusivity, specifically inclusivity, of women for sustainable development. One of the UN SDG goals is gender equality, and the CFTA has recognized this. It has recognized this with the Youth and Women Protocol. But when you look at the sustainability, the CFTA and sustainability, we did a research and we were able to see that the CFTA is going to connect approximately 1.27 billion people. We will have easier African business to trade, and then countries will benefit faster from growth of exports, boosting industrialization, increase industrialization, also allowing countries to move up value chains, and also 30 million people being lifted out of extreme poverty by 2035. And this is really important because everywhere we turn, we see, Africa being the continent whereby we have a lot of extreme poverty. And this CFTA provides that tool to remove, our African brothers and sisters who are experiencing extreme poverty. Then in terms of looking at the relationship between, trade and inclusion, the importance of women participating cannot be overemphasized, because you see in most African countries, the population of women are even more than men. But when it comes to engagement and provision of equal opportunity, that is not done. You have women not, completing their studies, a lot of them dropping out due to early pregnancies, early marriages. Those who even make it still have to deal with a lot of patriarchy, whereby you have, not equal opportunity given to them, or even they are looked down, as a result, or, as of the perceptions that were there because of patriarchy. So it's really important that countries now focus, come out of that patriarchy and see that they are involving, both populations, both women and men, and looking at women not only as, lesser people, but also looking at them as, a resource that the country can be able to really capitalize on. Last week I was in Eswatini, that is Swaziland, and I was giving them an example of what it means not to include women in trade or even in economic opportunities for a country. And I gave an analogy whereby if you don't include women, and for example, you're going to play football, it's like taking half of your players to go and play with, a team that has all its players. So you, Africa, go to play, if you only include men, you're going to play with 5, while the other countries, outside Africa are playing with all their 11, team members. So that's basically it. African countries need to look and realize that, continuously marginalizing and not including women, then it's costing them, because these are the women who will be able to create the employment opportunities. These are the women who are going to invest. And when you go to any African market, the majority are always women. So it means that there is that potential that has not really been leveraged. And that's where we as UNECA come in to assist in providing, technical support to governments to ensure that the agenda mainstreaming, not only the CFTA, but all other corresponding, strategies, that they are mainstreaming to ensure that there's equal participation. If there are any inequalities that have been realized, strategies are put in place to mitigate against, these inequalities. So the CFTA itself, as I mentioned, recognizes the importance of gender inequality, the gender equality, and specifically focuses on improving export capacity for informal suppliers. I know this workshop is focusing on formal trade, but we have a huge chunk of our sisters, actually 70% of informal cross-border trade in Africa are women. So it's important also to look at them and see what are the challenges that they have and how they can be, leveraged or even assisted to take advantage of the CFTA. And a lot of them have low levels of education. They are prone to, being misinformed or being misused. So it's important that policy helps for inclusion, not only of women who are, you'd say women who are at a professional level or formalized level. You'll find that those women are still, they're not very many. Majority of women who are trading or who are doing one form of business or another, a lot of them are in the informal sectors. Also, the CFTA will see, it's been projected that, there will be an increase in exports of female-oriented sectors in manufacturing, agriculture, and value addition. Also, there's a projected increase in intra-African exports, specifically in labor-intensive industries and low-skilled wages. Then strengthening regional value chains. I've talked about non-tariff barriers and also the protocol that has been developed. So just to overemphasize, women in Africa are most likely to be entrepreneurs than men. So the CFTA is squarely, an agreement that really needs to benefit women. So in terms of the opportunities that are there, job creation, the agreement also prevents an opportunity to remove costs and barriers to trade, to encourage entrepreneurship. And for a long time, I think a lot of us have been looking at entrepreneurship as a side hustle or something that you do when you do not have a job, or you've graduated and you've not gotten a job. I think there needs to be a change in how we look at entrepreneurship, that it should be, a dignified profession that somebody can even, take it up immediately, not, be seen as a side hustle. The agreement also seeks to support value addition through regional value chains, linkages, and niche industries. And for a long time, I think African countries, we have been exporting our goods in raw form, not processed or even, value added. So this agreement actually presents that opportunity for us to be able to value add and, sell our products at even better prices than, selling it at raw commodities. Private sector public participation, that has really been happening because as negotiations are ongoing, then the private sector really need to be consulted, because it's an agreement that the government negotiates, but the primary beneficiaries of this agreement are the private sector. Also, digitization will be incentivized, formalization of businesses, addressing of the NTBs, and also highlighting and advancing, complementary policies to support inclusion. And I've talked about access to finance, skills upgrading, and also capacity building. So there's a lot that stands to be gained under this agreement. And it's important that, policy is aligned to ensure that, the opportunities, to ensure that, the implementation strategies ensure that there's equal opportunity for both men and women, and whereby there is, an instance whereby women are not having equal opportunities, then mitigation measures are put in place. Because we're not talking about informal traders, I'm going to move forward to just talk about our approach in terms of national implementation strategies. We have supported over 40 member states of the CFTA to develop their national implementation strategy, including Kenya. And then also in terms of the implementation strategy, the strategies have cross-cutting issues, and gender is really one of them that, is inbuilt in the implementation strategies. And then what we also do as ECA is that we support the sensitization and capacity building for the private sector, for the agreement on NTBs, trade remedies, development of sectoral trade, strategies, identifying products, market analysis. So even as we assist to put in place the implementation strategy, the next stage is now to create awareness and to support the private sector to take advantage of this. And that's the reason why we're here today, to just tell you what we do and also just, build the capacity around what the CFTA is. And then in terms of opportunities, the lots of opportunities are there for women to participate in this. The women need to be part of implementation committees, and I'm happy in Kenya that is happening. When there are capacity building initiatives that are there, then it's important that we have inclusion of women in those capacity building initiatives and training to ensure that this information is is passed down. So I'm just going to take you through some of the challenges. We've done consultations in several African countries, and we came up with challenges that most African women face. And I'm going to just go through some of those challenges. And after this, you can bring up a challenge that may not be part of this. And we'll go now to the next stage, whereby we can receive contributions on what you think that the Women and Youth Protocol under the CFTA can include. So some of the challenges that were there that have been highlighted by other women in other forums include, closed airspaces making cost of travel very high, mobile communication being very high, in cost, political instability, language barriers, corruption, currency exchange ability. Then we have protection of intellectual data, then access to finance, lack of coordination amongst organizations across African countries, logistics and transport challenges, lack of skills in digital skills and entrepreneurship skills, visa restrictions. It's good news now that I think South Africa has granted some visa provisions for Kenya, but we need to see this happening across all African countries, whereby you should be able to travel visa-free to all African countries. Then also lack of productive capacity is also a challenge that was brought out by women traders. Low quality products, lack of trust, low self-confidence, lack of technological know-how, poor coordination, lack of knowledge on regulations that are there for you to participate in trade, the fear of taking risks, prejudice and exploitation by men, lack of information, the natural biological experiences, for example, pregnancy, menopause, breastfeeding, lack of opportunity to value add, lack of education, gender-based violence, and also the responsibility, the care responsibility that women have in the family, which now lessens their time for them to be able to participate in trade.